Nobody in Montecito expected the message to land the way it did. Not Meghan, not her team, not even Harry, who had gotten used to tension from the other side of the Atlantic. For months, Meghan had been building what she believed would be her grand return to the Invictus stage. She had planned every detail with the precision of someone stepping back into the spotlight after way too long. Her team had already started scouting camera angles for a potential behind-the-scenes special. Everything was locked in for a triumphant return to the Invictus Games. The event she once proudly walked beside Harry through. The event she believed she helped modernize, energize, and elevate. And then everything collapsed with one quiet message. It came through private channels. Not a formal announcement, not a press release, just a simple direct communication that left her frozen where she stood. Meghan Markle would not be allowed to attend Invictus. Not as a guest, not as a speaker, not even as Harry's spouse. No red carpet, no phone call, no official welcome, nothing. It was more than a no. It was a wall, a complete block. The kind of block that doesn't come from miscommunication or scheduling issues. The kind that comes from the very top. People close to Meghan say she didn't believe it at first. She thought it was a mistake, a misunderstanding, a logistical problem that could be solved with a few phone calls. But the quiet message had been deliberate, careful, final. And the moment the truth started sinking in, the story shifted from shock to crisis. Because if Meghan wasn't allowed at Invictus, a place she once walked proudly with the cameras flashing, then this wasn't just a rejection. This was a statement, a message from the royal institution she once tried to escape, now sending the clearest sign yet that the door was firmly, deliberately closed. And Meghan was only beginning to understand how deep the decision ran. What Meghan didn't yet know was that her block wasn't the result of one person's frustration or a single complaint whispered behind palace walls. It was the outcome of a coordinated decision. A decision crafted inside private rooms where almost no one is allowed, where the stakes are royal, and where every move is weighed like a piece of gold on a scale. Sources say it began with King Charles requesting a quiet conversation with senior advisors. William was brought in, then Catherine, then officials handling Commonwealth relations, military partnerships, and Invictus logistics. The topic was simple. How do we handle Invictus this year? And what do we do about Meghan? What followed wasn't tense or angry. It was calm, measured, deliberate. But the concerns were clear. She brought Hollywood cameras where they didn't belong. The focus shifted from injured warriors to her fashion moments. Documentary crews pushed for emotional scenes that made veterans uncomfortable. And with Netflix preparing another project, the palace feared Invictus would turn into a stage. There had already been quiet warnings after Toronto in 2017, more after The Hague, and even more after her recent behind-the-scenes requests. This wasn't about pettiness. This wasn't about revenge. This was about control and image and keeping an event centered on wounded soldiers from becoming part of a reality show storyline. So, the royals held a private call, not a brief one, an hour-long strategy conversation that insiders describe as unusually unified. By the end, the verdict was absolute. Meghan cannot attend Invictus in any official, semi-official, or even passive capacity. And the moment Meghan learned the truth, the calm inside the palace turned into a storm inside Montecito. If the block from Invictus shook Meghan, then what came next shattered her. Because the worst part wasn't that she was excluded. It was who was invited in her place. At first, Meghan didn't know. She kept making calls trying to find some sign that the decision could be reversed. She hoped someone would say, "Give it a few days. Things will change." But then a quiet message reached her team. Catherine had been asked to attend certain Invictus events in an official capacity. Not just as a royal, not just as William's wife, but as someone stepping into the emotional spaces Meghan used to fill. Meeting veterans, greeting families, supporting injured soldiers. The moment Meghan heard that, everything around her supposedly went silent. Because this wasn't rejection, this was replacement. Catherine, the woman Meghan had once claimed made her cry, now stepping into roles Meghan believed she helped shape. The palace hadn't simply removed her. They had filled the space with someone they believed was safer, calmer, more trusted. Inside the Montecito home, Staff members later whispered about raised voices, slammed doors, and long emotional conversations drifting down hallways. To Meghan, this wasn't about one event. It was about the message behind it. We don't need you. We don't want you. And we've chosen someone else. Nothing cuts deeper than being replaced. And for Meghan, this was the moment the block transformed from a political decision into a personal humiliation. Just when Meghan thought the Invictus rejection couldn't get worse, the palace uncovered something that changed the entire situation. The truth behind Harry's secret Canada trip. The trip seemed harmless on the surface. A quick visit, meetings with charities, smiling photos with veterans. But something about the timing had bothered palace officials. So they quietly started checking the details. And that's when everything started falling apart. When the palace contacted Canadian officials, they found no record of Harry's team sending official notice. No documentation of approval for the visit. No communication through the proper Commonwealth channels. Then the palace asked Harry's team for proof. But each time they gave a story, the details shifted. Dates didn't match. Emails didn't exist. Phone calls they claimed happened simply didn't. So investigators checked telecommunications data. What they found left senior royals speechless. There was zero evidence that Harry's team had notified the palace at all. The entire "we informed them out of courtesy" narrative had supposedly been invented. And then came the real explosion. Investigators supposedly discovered messages showing Meghan encouraging Harry to stick to this story even when it wasn't true. That changed everything. To the royals, this was no longer a case of misunderstandings or emotional decisions. This was deliberate deception designed to embarrass the institution while shielding themselves from accountability. When the findings were presented to King Charles and Prince William, the mood supposedly turned from tired frustration to something much colder. The palace wasn't simply annoyed anymore. They were done. While the Canada scandal simmered, another issue was rising. And this one came from Meghan's Hollywood world. Because Netflix wasn't just hoping to cover her Invictus return, they supposedly had a full documentary concept ready to go. Sources whispered that the streaming giant planned a dramatic series showing Meghan as the misunderstood royal, the emotional supporter of veterans, the woman blocked by a cruel institution, the fighter overcoming palace persecution. But the real problem wasn't the narrative. It was what Netflix wanted from the veterans. Reports say they requested exclusive access to private therapy sessions, emotional breakdowns caught on camera, interviews about traumatic injuries, family conflicts filmed for dramatic effect. They even proposed scenarios where Meghan could be filmed comforting crying veterans, scenes that would be shaped to maximize emotional impact. Organizers were horrified, veterans were offended, and even some Netflix staff supposedly questioned the ethics of the project. But the final straw, Netflix supposedly wanted wounded warriors to sign contracts giving the platform ownership of their personal stories permanently. When word of this reached King Charles, his reaction was immediate. No royal would ever participate in any event that allowed the exploitation of British veterans. Invictus organizers agreed. Netflix was banned from access. And since Meghan's involvement depended heavily on securing documentary material, her attendance became impossible. It wasn't just a block, it was a complete shutout. And now we reached a final chapter. The moment that ties everything together. The moment that explains why this Invictus block wasn't temporary, but the beginning of a new royal reality. After reviewing the Canada investigation, the Netflix issue, the veterans' concerns, and 5 years of crisis, King Charles, Prince William, and Catherine supposedly held a decisive private meeting. They created what one insider described as a comprehensive Sussex case file, a document outlining every incident, every conflict, every pattern of behavior that threatened the dignity and stability of the monarchy. And then came the verdict. Harry and Meghan would be treated as complete outsiders. No special protocol, no royal privileges, no invitations, no coordination, no public acknowledgements, no more open doors. In other words, the royal family chose silence as their strongest weapon. By refusing to engage, they removed the oxygen that fueled the Sussex narrative. No drama, no reactions, no public conflict, just a cold, permanent absence. According to sources, this strategy wasn't about punishment. It was about protecting the monarchy from chaos that had gone on for too long. And while nothing has been officially announced, the message behind closed doors is unwavering. Meghan will never again be welcomed at a royal or Commonwealth event. Harry is allowed to return, but only alone and only on strict terms. And even that possibility grows smaller each day. As for Meghan, word from Montecito is that she has finally realized something devastating. It's not just a temporary block. It's not a one-event disagreement. It is the quiet end of her royal relevance. A chapter closed. A story finished. A door locked. And as the palace stands silent and veterans prepare for an Invictus Games without distraction, and Harry stares at the crossroads between his past and his present, one truth hangs in the air like heavy smoke. This wasn't just the blocking of a return. It was the final separation of two worlds that may never meet again. And what comes next for all of them is a story we haven't even begun to uncover.